along. This is like the tour day different city planners here. And so the next person we have up here, we've got Jimmy Schumacher from the St. Paul Public Works who's a St. Paul Public Works, there we go, transportation planner. And Jimmy is here to talk with us a little bit about the St. Paul bicycle plan. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jimmy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me. I'm going to share a screen like Ann did. And let me know if you can see it. Great. Thanks. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jimmy Shoemaker. I am, like you just heard, I am part of the Department of Public Works. I work closely with Parks and Rec, so I'm familiar with the project that Ann just told you about. I'm fairly new to the city. I guess now a year. But I work in, Public Works does a lot of different things. We do trash and, garbage and recycling. We do plowing. We do street design and repair and many other things. But I'm in transportation planning and safety, which is a division within Public Works that thinks a bit more about long range planning. So we do things like modal plans. So, the pedestrian plan came out of our group. We do work on transit projects a lot. So if you're familiar with the Rush Line, now it's called the Purple Line, or the Gold Line, Riverview Corridor, those are all projects that we are a part of and kind of represent the city on, along with many other people. So I'm from St. Paul. I grew up in St. Paul in Lexington Hamlin neighborhood, which I guess is now called Union Park. And I live in Hamlin Midway, so just I guess south of you all. So I'm glad to be here. And another thing that we work on is the St. Paul Bicycle Plan, and we are updating that. Could you remind me how much time I have roughly, Maggie?
You have whatever time you want. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, you're good. No time crunch. You're our last presenter, and after this, it's just on to local updates. So you're good.
Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. Great. Well, yeah, we'll have certainly some time at the end for questions. But if there's something burning, feel free to jump off mute and ask. So what I want to talk about today is the general timeline of the update process. This is a planning process, so this isn't. You just heard about kind of a construction project from Ann, but this is kind of a planning process. So I want to talk about the current plan. You'll probably hear me say the 2015 plan or the current plan. Those are the same thing. We're just updating that plan. And I want to talk about kind of next steps and engagement. I will say, if you haven't already heard of or taken the survey at stpaul.gov/bike plan. That's the big push from this round of engagement this fall. So if you've taken that survey, thank you. And maybe you could tell a friend. And if you haven't, it closes October 31st. So we're trying to get as many people to take that survey as we can. So this is the timeline for the bicycle plan update. We're in the fall here. I've talked to, I don't know, probably 12 of the 17 district councils, over the last month and a half. I've talked to folks at Ramsey County, of course, MnDOT, of course, the DNR, council offices. I'm kind of on a tour here trying to get the word out about this process. In the winter, and I'll tell you about what we're trying to gain from this initial outreach. In the winter, we'll take what we heard and draft some updates to the plan. And then I'll come back to you all in the spring and share what we heard, share some initial draft recommendations, and we're hoping to get City Council to adopt the bike plan, the updated bike plan next summer. So, not everyone's familiar with the bike plan. The current bike plan was adopted in 2015 in March of that year, and it kind of broadly provides a direction for the development of a network bicycle facilities. And bicycle facilities is just kind of a catch-all term. So Anne mentioned the paths kind of going in, Como. Bike lanes are included in bike facilities, bike boulevards. And so when I say bike facilities, I mean kind of any sort of infrastructure that's built for bikes. So it provides kind of direction on the rollout and the development of that network. It also highlights, the current plan also highlights engagement between 2011 and 2014. So there was about 3 years of engagement. This was the first bike plan for the city of St. Paul. I guess the first kind of formal bike plan. And it was updated in 2017 to include some new projects that had happened even since 2015. And then it does recommend additional updates, which is what we're doing today. So the plan is used. I use the plan every day. I reference the plan every day, and we implement the planned bike network, which I'll show in a second, when we have the opportunities to do so. So if you're familiar with mill and overlay projects, which are basically resurfacing projects, those don't change the curbs, they just resurface. But when we tear up the pavement and put it back down, it's the chance to restripe the road and restripe the road with say bike lanes, for example. We also, something that's more intensive or robust would be something like a street reconstruction, which we don't do a ton of, but you're familiar with Como, kind of west of Hamlin, which I'll talk about in a bit. That's an example of a street reconstruction. So that's the opportunity to tear up the road from property line to property line, including the curbs, and kind of put back what we want there. New developments like Highland Bridge or the Ford site, where we're building new roads and kind of, redeveloping an entire big area. That's a chance for us to increase and add bicycle facilities. And I mentioned transit projects. So, things like the Gold Line, we want to take the opportunity to make new connections to transit facilities, for example, for people biking. And then just, broadly as a reference for other planning efforts, Parks and Rec uses our bike plan all the time. The county and the state, of course, use it all the time. And when I say bike plan, there's a lot of information in the current bike plan, but this is really what it's all about. This map shows the planned bike network. So a lot of these have been constructed, but a lot of them have not. So this is what we hope the network will look like, years down the line. And for the purposes of this update, we are keeping, we're not wiping this away. We're still confident and comfortable with the streets that are identified for bike facilities. It's about what bike facility is planned for that street. So you'll notice that on the right here in the legend, there are different facility types. And the green are something like an off-street path that kind of goes around Como, for example, Como Lake, for example. Bike lanes you see in red, and then kind of going on with different facility types. So we don't plan on largely changing what streets are planned for bike facilities, but rather what facilities are planned for those streets. So I'll talk more about that for sure. But progress we've made since 2015, we've implemented 67 miles of bike facilities have been added since 2015. And that's actually, I just made this presentation about a month ago, and that's already out of date. We've already added, with this construction season, some more miles of bike facilities. And of course, that includes implementation from our partners at Parks and Rec, Ramsey County, MnDOT, the DNR. So several of these you probably see or are familiar with. In the bottom left there is Como along the fairgrounds, which is a very new project. Wheelock Parkway, which you're familiar with in your district. In Union Park is Pelham Boulevard, which runs kind of along Town and Country. And then in the top right is in my neighborhood, which is Fairview, north of University. Those are buffered bike lanes. And in fact, I think they're in your district also, but along Energy Park drive are some new buffered bike lanes also. So this is what the bike network looked like in 2015. So basically when the original plan was created and adopted. And so, and then in those 6 short years, we've added all of this mileage, and you see the different facility types are represented by different line colors. So a lot of miles of bike lanes and shared, or rather not shared use paths, I should say off-street paths have been constructed. And of course, you all are probably familiar with the Grand Round. So those were, I guess this is the time to mention that out of the 2015 plan came some big recommendations. And a couple of those big recommendations were, let's complete the Grand Round. So the Grand Round is this network of kind of comfortable and off-street bike facilities that link all our parks around the city. So that was one big initiative that came out of it, was complete the Grand Round. And then the other one was focus on downtown bike facilities. And so that's comes in the form of the Capital City Bikeway, the CCB. And we've implemented some of that, and we have plans in the next couple of years to implement more of that. So I say that to get the wheels turning for you all, because that's one of the big things we want to hear from this round of engagement is, where should our priorities be now that we've kind of checked off some major boxes from the previous plan? And so if you put the previous network together with what we've built over the last 6 years, you get this bike network, which was current as of about April of this year, but already is a little out of date, as I mentioned. And you all are familiar with the Grand Round. I've taken this presentation to other districts, and I'm reminded that not everybody knows what the Grand Round is. And of course, the Grand Round is this loop of pretty comfortable facilities that goes around the city. So why are we updating? That was what came out of the plan. Those were our priorities that came out of the plan. So why are we updating it now? And these are several reasons on the screen. I'll go through them kind of quickly and talk a little bit more about some of them. The 2019 St. Paul Climate Action and Resilience Plan, which was adopted in 2019, specifically calls for more separated facilities. And so that's something I'll throw around a lot. Separated facilities are kind of what they sound like. There's separation between where people are biking and where people are driving. And that's a big thing that's coming out of this update. We also want to incorporate additional construction that's happened over the past few years. So I mentioned the Capital City Bikeway, Highland Bridge at the Ford site, and the Grand Round. And then specifically, like I mentioned already, we want to identify new priorities. So what's kind of the next big thing for St. Paul? And that is a question on the survey to plug that again. In response to community feedback, we hear all the time from folks that, bike lanes are good, but I need more separated facilities to feel comfortable riding with my 85-year-old mother or my 8-year-old kid. So we want to be conscious of that feedback. Things have changed since 2015. It's amazing how quickly kind of best practices in bike planning and design can change even since 2015. So we want to update the plan to reflect that. We also want to provide additional policy guidance on what it takes to operate and maintain a top-notch bike network. We hear that all the time, that I would like to ride in the winter and I can't because the streets aren't plowed, the shared use paths aren't plowed. So we want to be a bit more explicit and give more policy guidance on that. Again, this isn't a maintenance plan, but we can certainly be more supportive of what is required to operate and maintain a bike network. This second to last one is a bit nuanced, and I'll give an example, but we want to make sure that our bicycle goals aren't competing with our pedestrian goals. And then finally, and this is kind of the big thing, is this last one, is some of the network needs to be updated to include more separation between people biking and people driving. And that really aligns with state and national best practices. Our plan is a little out of date, and so we want to bring it up to standards of nowadays, of the 2020s, I suppose. So I mentioned the Climate Action Resilience Plan was adopted in 2019, and it's kind of a framework for addressing the negative impacts of climate change in St. Paul. And specifically, there's a lot of great stuff in this. If you've never read it, it talks about, building and energy use, talks about trash and waste, but it does have a significant chapter devoted to transportation. And specifically, it says, how are we going to get more people biking? Well, it means to build more separated bicycle facilities. And this really is like the policy guidance. So this was adopted by the city council. It gives us direction to update the bike plan. Another thing is making sure our bicycle goals aren't competing with our pedestrian goals. And this should look familiar, I think, to some of you. These two photos are taken at the same place. The top at Hamlin and Como looking west. And the top one is taken in probably 2019, and the bottom one is taken just a couple months ago. And of course, the street looks different nowadays. But you'll notice both designs accommodate people walking. So, sidewalks still exist, and they existed before. Transit use is still accommodated. So we still have buses running Route 3 on on Como. On-street parking was largely maintained as part of the reconstruction from the bottom. And then people driving, there are through lanes on both the before and after. But the biggest thing that changed is you'll notice in the top image, the standard bike lanes striped, probably about 6-foot bike lanes in either direction. When we designed the street and reconstructed it, we took the bicycle space and instead put that we call outside of the curbs, behind the curbs, which you see and are familiar with in the bottom image, this really great two-way separated bike lane. And that's because we know that people want that. They want more separation. Some people don't feel comfortable riding. A lot of people don't feel comfortable riding in the street with traffic. So, and what that allowed us to do is narrow the entire road. And especially at crossings, it allowed us to narrow it by about 20 feet. So that we know is good for pedestrians. So that accomplishes pedestrian goals while also accomplishing bicycle goals. That's another reason why we're updating the plan. So, and then finally, operation and maintenance. I mentioned this a moment ago, but we want, our street crews work very hard to, clear snow and patch potholes, but, frankly, resources are limited. And with very few exceptions, as we've built out the bike network since 2015, operation and maintenance funding has not kept up with that expansion of the bike network. So our operations teams are being asked to do more with the same amount of funding. So we want to be explicit about that need, and it really, we ask our district councils and our advocates to advocate for more funding, because that is really what's needed. So we want to be more explicit about maintenance and operation funding and policies. Finally, I mentioned this, our bike plan is a little out of date when it comes to design. The Federal Highway Administration and MnDOT, the left and right plans respectively, are design manuals. They have design manuals for selecting the appropriate bicycle facility, and they use this table that we will use to update our plan, or this graphic that says the facility that's recommended for any street should depend on vehicle volumes and vehicle speeds. So as you see with this, as vehicle volumes go up and as vehicle speeds go up, the facility type that's recommended or that's best for that road changes. So we know that our plan currently does not reflect this, and so we are going to update the plan to better reflect this guidance. Okay, so I mentioned a lot of terms: separated bike lanes, shared use paths. This is the terminology that we're using. You heard Anne say trail. A lot of people use the word trail, and there's nothing wrong with that. This language is consistent with MnDOT and the federal government. So when we say separated bike lanes and shared use paths, probably a lot of things come to mind. And so I'm going to define a little bit what we mean by that. And they probably look very familiar. So separated bike lanes, a great example of this is on Jackson in downtown St. Paul. It's an exclusive facility for people biking. So this is separated bike lanes. So this is not a shared space between people walking and biking. This is exclusive for biking. And it's located either within the roadway between the curbs with some, or I should say behind the curb, but it has to have some vertical or physical element that separates people biking and walking. So in this case, you see kind of this planted buffer. I mean, you see trees planted in there, you see a curb, you see a sign. So there's a physical barrier between people biking and walking, rather between people biking and driving. And then there is pedestrian space over on the left side. Another great example, which is one we kind of talked about, is on Hamlin, or rather on Como, just west of Hamlin. Here you see pedestrian space, you see vehicle space, and then you see a separated space specifically for people biking. Another great example is on Wheelock. Of course, this is a separated bike lane also. These offer horizontal and vertical separation. Those are kind of jargony terms. Horizontal separation, I think of as kind of like laterally removed from the space where people are driving. And then of course, vertical separation, like I mentioned, is some sort of physical barrier that a driver would hit and know that they should not be encroaching on any further into this space. So it could be trees, it could be signs, it's a curb, and the horizontal separation is this kind of lateral space. We do have examples of kind of interim treatments. So on Pelham Boulevard, if you've ever ridden along kind of town and country golf course, we don't have the resources budgeted to totally reconstruct Pelham to look something like Como. So in the meantime, we do these kind of interim treatments, which is these we call them flexible delineators, which are these white kind of candlestick posts that offer some sort of vertical and physical separation between people driving and people riding on this two-way separated bike lane. A little bit more heavy duty is something in downtown St. Paul on 10th Street, which is probably our newest addition, the separated bike lane network, which here you see the pedestrian space, you see the drive space, and then you see the separated bike lane. And they're separated with these kind of heavy duty bollards and curbs. But we don't have many examples of our one-way separated bike lanes. So, but they do exist in other cities. And they will certainly, be considered going forward in St. Paul. This is in Portland, so you see Portland, Oregon, so you see kind of separation with these planters. And then in Philadelphia and many other cities, it can be a one-way separated bike lane could be separated from traffic using parked cars. So these are parked cars here, and then people ride along the curb in between the parking lane and the curb. Shared use paths, it's a slight distinction, but it is a distinction. Shared use paths are just what they sound like. They're shared between people biking and walking. So just the same on Como, but just further west along the fairgrounds is a shared use path, which is for people biking and walking. Another example is the Gateway Trail, more of kind of a recreational trail, but that's another example of a shared use path. I do want to just talk about what we don't consider separated bike lanes or shared use paths. And, we see these all over St. Paul. We will continue constructing things like bike lanes. This is, these aren't going away. This offers some horizontal separation between people driving and people biking, but the critical thing that's missing is a vertical or physical element. So there's nothing really stopping a car, as I'm sure some of you have experienced, from encroaching on that bike lane. We will continue building these where they are appropriate, where vehicle volumes and vehicle speeds are appropriate to warrant a bike lane. A buffered bike lane gives a little bit more horizontal separation, like on Energy Park Drive or on Summit Avenue, but it does not offer a vertical physical element. Bike boulevards are something else that we'll continue to construct. These are shared spaces between people biking and people driving, but we like to add traffic calming where we can afford to do it, so that it encourages lower vehicle speeds, and so people feel more comfortable biking with that traffic. We also typically only construct bike boulevards on kind of low volume residential streets. And then kind of the lowest facility on the ladder is something called an enhanced shared lane, which really is not much more than signage and striping. We would prefer to never construct these, but where there are constraints, we might continue to construct these. I wouldn't say that we're going to totally do away with them, though we are trying to limit our construction of those. So again, I share with you the planned bike network. You've already seen this. Each one of those facilities I just went over represents a different color on this map. And in summary, what this update will do is it will re-identify some of the streets for more separation. So here are two graphics at the bottom. This is an example street network. So in the current plan, you see several facilities identified on streets A, B, C, D, and E. This is just an example, but you see street A is in red, and red means bike lane, just a standard stripe bike lane, and that's how it's identified in the 2015 plan. However, in the 22, as part of this update, in the 22 plan, we might look at this and say, street A, there's a lot of vehicle volume, high volumes, high speeds. We really think that we should plan for a separated facility. So either a separated bike lane or a shared use path. And that's what you see in green. So street A could be kind of re-identified or reclassified for something that's more separated. You'll see, however, that, like, for example, streets C, D, and E did not get upgraded. They didn't change between 2015 and 2022. And that's likely to happen. In fact, that will probably happen a lot, is that we're not going to change every single street that has been identified for a bike facility. You'll also notice that street B wasn't identified in the current plan, and it's likely that it won't be identified for a bike facility in the 2022 plan. We are looking for feedback from folks on the survey to say, hey, you really missed street B. That should really be a bike facility. And so we're not ruling out adding new kind of network links, but generally we are, as I said, we're comfortable with the network that we identified. It's just changing the facilities in some instances. So I just have a few more slides. So, broadly, this is the scope of the update. We are updating to provide more guidance and clarity on separated bike lanes and shared use paths. As it is right now, the plan doesn't talk very much about these. We will be updating some of the streets to be more separated. And again, this is another thing that we're really looking for feedback on, is to identify the top priorities going forward. And then, what is not being considered, we're not, like I said, we're not kind of wiping the slate clean and rethinking the entire bike network. And we're also not going to create a completely new planning document. We're just going to update the existing document. So engagement, you've seen this timeline. I showed it at the beginning. So that's, kind of the big questions this fall are, what are the major priorities for folks? Did we miss any big network gaps? Did we totally miss something? And that's what we're asking you all about. And that's on the survey, stpaul.gov/bike plan. And then over the winter, we'll be drafting the updates and drafting kind of what we think are the priorities. And then we'll be sharing that with you all come spring, and then adopting the plan in the summer, we hope. We've sent flyers out, we've posted them at libraries and rec centers in multiple languages. But the big part of this fall round is to ask about priorities and ask about system gaps and just share the scope and timeline and the fact that we're doing this. We do have a survey, as I've mentioned many times. We have over 1,100 surveys returned so far. And that's really good. I'm really happy with that. A couple weeks ago, I did kind of crunch some numbers. So this is a bit out of date. This is actually from when we had about 800 surveys. And what I'm showing here are, of those 800 surveys, 630-ish people gave their zip code. And so these are the number of responses we've collected from zip codes in St. Paul. So you all are probably in 55104, 55107, 55108 maybe. So we've heard a lot from you all, but I would encourage you to promote this more. It closes October 31st. You know, we've heard a lot from McAllister Groveland and Union Park, a lot from Highland. We've gotten a lot from kind of the North End and Payne Phelan. And so we're going to continue working with areas where we haven't heard much from. In terms of the ages of those 800 or so people who responded and provided their age, I'm pretty happy with the over 18 number of responses like that. You know, that's a pretty good responses, pretty equal, I should say. You'll notice that we received at this time, we've received one response from someone who's under 18. So I'm working with St. Paul Public Schools. I do a lot of safe routes to school work. So I'm working with SPPS and the St. Paul Youth Commission, which is part of Parks, to engage young people and try to get them to take the survey. Some of the initial survey results, there's some open-ended questions. People are asking for safe and separated bike facilities and a connected network of those. So we hear that all the time. Winter maintenance of the bike network is something that we're hearing a lot, as I mentioned. Connections to and from downtown. People want to be able to bike to and from downtown. Connections over barriers. So St. Paul has a lot of railroad tracks. 94 and 35 and 61 and the river. Also more bike parking. People want more places to park their bikes, and then just generally slowing traffic down in their neighborhoods so I can bike on my neighborhood street. So I haven't gone through all 1,100 responses. I'm kind of wondering how I'm going to do that, but I will. So fill out the survey, please. We've had some in-person meetings. We've gone to some events, I should say. We've had several kind of presentations. We've recorded one of those and put it up on our website, which is stpaul.gov/bike plan. And then again, the big push is this survey, which asks a lot of these targeted questions. And that is open until October 31st. And that is all I have for you all. So I'd love questions or thoughts.
I've got one.
Yeah.
A few of my neighbors have commented about, I don't think you have pictures of it though. Arona and Como on the north side. When you come out of there, it's kind of a goofy way you made the intersection, because, okay, you stop, the stop sign, but you can't see the road. I mean, you can't see if there's cars coming where you have to stop, you know, and you really have to go and sit like in the bike lane almost to actually see if you can go. You know what I'm trying to say? And it gets cumbersome because you're sitting in the way of the bikes that want to come, but that's the only place you can go. Is this? That's the old way.
Yeah, this is the old one. Yeah.
Yeah, but it sticks out really far. And it's just, at Pascal, I don't think it's like that. It's just at Arona.
Okay, you mean, are you talking
kind
about
of like
here?
that at Pascal also, but
Is it?
that might be a traffic calming thing to make sure the car stays behind, looks to see if there's bikers coming before it
Well,
pulls out.
that could be. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right. Yeah, the idea is, I think,
So we
you know,
got to
I would
stop
just-
twice is what we have to do.
right. and yeah, I mean, I guess that some people might see that as good design, just to make sure people are looking, once to cross the,
Mhm.
the separated bike lane and then again to enter the street.
Right.
But the idea is to have as much visibility for someone, biking here and, making that a comfortable crossing also. Is this where you're talking about, Dolores?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know we did recently get a question from a neighbor of yours, and I believe there's some hedges that need trimming, and I
That
did.
could be.
Yeah, they just said it does kind of.
Um,
I think it was along.
Well,
Como that it
part of
does
the problem is the auto place. Because that corner, is that fence and stuff where you have us sitting to stop. The fence is right there, and you cannot see Como Avenue
Yeah.
to the right. And then I'm trying to think on the left if he has hedges now or not. I can't remember.
Could be at another crossing, but I know that was flagged as something.
Yeah, I don't think the people on the left have hedges, but it is really hard. And then, well, the buses can come and sit there too. So there's a bus stop right there too. So it's like a lot of things are happening at that particular intersection. Because we got the bus stop and we got, that auto place where it's got real big and yeah. And I know you had to go out a little further because of that business section. It's like the business section, you didn't have any yard to go or no boulevard to go into like you did the rest of Como Avenue. He had all that boulevard space to work with. There you go.
Mhm.
Is that with it done? Yeah. See,
Yeah,
we're stopping way back there, way back by the business, and then you can't see way up there. So I'm wondering if you should maybe have like a yield there, and then the stop sign actually here. I don't know.
well,
I mean, you can't see where I'm pointing, but
yeah, it looks like there is, more space. It was designed to have more space so someone can, safely, look both ways on the bike path, like, separated bike lane and then go over and have to look again.
right.
But I think that's what, that also by bringing that curbway out, that also means that this crossing is much shorter for people walking.
Right, that too,
Yeah.
which is good
Mhm.
because that was one problem was getting across that street.
Right.
Yeah.
I see
Well,
on this-
they were complaining to me, so I thought I'd just bring it up,
Yeah. Thanks,
see what
Dolores.
you have
I
to say
appreciate it.
about it, and I don't know. And they have complained that the bikers, they just zoom right through there. They don't watch, for traffic at all. And I'm thinking maybe they need a yield sign because that's a busy spot.
Yeah, I think, sadly, I would probably say that yield signs are probably not
They're
going to.
worthless, I suppose.
Yeah. The city.
Yeah.
Wants to, do stuff that is effective. And I think if bikers are going to go through there, then bikers are going to go through
I've
there.
even seen them go right through stop signs actually on Como Avenue there, where there's stop signs. They don't see any cars, they just go right through. They don't stop. So what are they legally supposed to do? Stop when there's a stop sign? Or
Yes.
can they zoom through?
No,
There's one, I think Dolores might be mentioning a stop sign that's near Snelling that looks from the bike path like it is a
No,
stop sign
I'm talking
for car
about
traffic.
Hamlin and Como. That one I've seen them
Hamlin
go
and
right
Como.
through.
Because yeah, it's the
And
same
that's
thing
when I
where
almost hit somebody at night.
you see cars, at that same intersection here
Mhm.
rolling through without looking. And I
Right,
think that, yeah, both might be thinking that they're yielding and then not really
yeah.
from the other perspective seeing that. But
But if
that
a
picture-
car is supposed to stop at that corner, isn't a bike supposed to stop too?
yes.
That's what they're not doing. So I guess,
Yeah.
Not all the
unfortunately,
time,
yeah,
but there are a
unfortunately-
few and I've almost hit them because they're going so fast. I didn't even know they were coming. Yeah. So I guess there's more education or something has to be done. And I don't know how the city's going to do that, but people have to be educated on the rules of biking.
Yeah, and that's something that's kind of, people are, there are bad behaviors out there, I guess.
Yeah, and then the problem is the motorist is the one who's always blamed because they hit the person.
Well,
You know what I'm
right,
trying
yeah.
to say.
I mean, I think that,
it's also on their
Yes.
onus to not do that. It's more the onus on the driver to 2,000-pound vehicle, I believe.
Right. But if they're moving so fast and there's things that you can't see them coming until they're there, you know what I'm trying to say? Because that has happened. And I almost hit somebody like that. I had stopped and I looked and they weren't there. And then all of a sudden they were there and they were going right in front of me. And I almost hit them. So I don't know. It's
Yeah, certainly. And I
scary.
think, a lot of the city plan, centers around trying to really focus on keeping bikes and cars as separate as possible. And it
Right.
sounds like, Jimmy, it sounds like what you guys are hearing in the surveys is that that's really what people are saying makes them the most comfortable kind of participating in the city
Right.
bike system, is that separation. So I think,
Yeah,
we
no,
certainly
otherwise-
are headed nicely in that direction.
Yeah, I like it that you put that separation between the cars and the bikes on Como, because I hated it when they were biking right next to me when I was driving. And now that they're on a separate lane in that boulevard area, that's so much better. I mean, that was a big improvement. Definitely. Yeah.
What other questions do we have for Jimmy while we have him here?
At that corner right there in Como, there's a drinking fountain and a bike repair piece. Has it come into like any questions about or comments about whether there should be like restroom stops along this grand round? Just out of curiosity.
It hasn't. No, it hasn't. We haven't heard much about kind of supporting facilities. That would largely be kind of outside of the scope of this bike plan. I haven't heard a lot about that.
There is a restroom not far from there, at the picnic area. So people could go there. I mean, it's really close to the bike path. And I don't know, maybe a little signage.
Yeah, no worries. I was just
I mean,
curious
it's
if
just a
that
thought of
came
sign,
up as
maybe a
a,
sign. Yeah, I
as an
know people
issue.
have to go or something. Just telling where the bathrooms are might help, you know.
Yep, and I will say that that's part, so, for those of you who have been around for a while, the wayfinding group that Rebecca Calvo and Tim Post, to just let you know how long ago this got started, really went through and kind of did an inventory around the park of which areas needed better signage and what signs should say. And I think one of the things that they did highlight in that, which has been extensively shared around the city, is letting people know when you're in the park where to find the nearest bathroom, and specifically which ones are seasonal and which ones are not. All right, and so I think that is certainly part of that. As we heard from Anne earlier tonight, I think the actual kind of fulfilling of the wayfinding recommendations is not, part of something that's happening this year, but it is out there. So good feedback.
Yeah, and that would be just, not knowing a ton about what Anne is thinking about, but she mentioned towards the end about that master plan, like the Como Regional Master Plan, Como Park Regional Master Plan. And that would be something, especially as it relates to Como, would be, things like wayfinding and bathrooms would be something that would surely be identified in that master plan.
So other questions for Jimmy while we've got him here?
I guess I just have a general question, but when you do a big project like the one you're looking at right now, what sort of vehicle traffic data do you get or have access to? Like specifically, I'm thinking vehicle counts and speeds. If you're just going on the posted speed limit, that might not be reality, unfortunately.
Right.
So
that's a great, oh, sorry, Chad.
No, that was pretty much finished.
No, that's a great point. And, when we related to, see if I can bring it up, related to that graphic, that we will largely plan and recommend facilities based on volumes and speeds. Chad, you bring up a good point. Just because it's posted at 25 or 20 does not mean that people are going that fast. Right. So that's where kind of it comes at this graphic. So that's where, we're going to have to, we do have speed data. We don't have it all over the city, and we will unlikely have it for every decision we have to make about a bike facility. But that is true. There's something called posted miles per hour, and then there's actual miles per hour. And so, we will err on the side of people are likely going faster than the posted speed limit when we make a decision about, if it's on the, if it's on this 20, if it's on the line, it's like, well, should we recommend a bike lane or something with more separation? We're probably going to assume that people are going faster than 25. And so when we reconstruct streets, there's something called the design speed. So there's this, you design a road for a certain speed that you're trying to achieve. And that's why on the freeway, the design speed is for, 55 or 60, and, curves are more gradual and lanes are wider because that's the speed you're designing for. And that's something that's just in the transportation engineering field, is that if we want slower speeds for cars, we have to design our streets to make them go slower. And so that's an example of on Como where, just right here where at Hamlin, where we narrow this throat. This is called a bump out or a curb extension. And narrowing the roadway, if you've ever driven on a narrow road in Europe or something, you go slower because it's so much more narrow. And so that's something that we try to do whenever we redesign streets, is make them a bit more narrow, especially at the corners where people are crossing.
Yeah, that's all great info. Yeah, vehicle traffic, slowing traffic down is one good way to get more people on bikes, basically. Like, I am hesitant to use shared spaces just because of how fast traffic is whizzing past me, so.
Yep, you're not alone.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not. And I just, anecdotally, I know the city pushed to lower speed limits, and I'm not sure how effective those new speed limit signs are. I see a lot of new signs, but I don't see a lot of people driving slower.
Yeah, we look to other cities. There is some research, I believe it's out of Seattle, that did that only did lowering the speed limits. And you wouldn't expect people to necessarily drive slower, and they did see some reduction. It's more than just, of course, putting up speed limit signs. It's enforcement of those speeds. But really, if you really wanted to move the dial, you would start designing streets to be much more narrow. And but streets for decades and decades were designed to get people through them in cars as fast as possible. So it's slowly moving in the direction of slower speeds in urban environments, but it takes time.
Yep. Long-term project, but it's trending the right direction. So
it sure is. Yeah,
that's good news.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say that at the D10 office, like, one of our number one calls that I field is from people talking about how fast people are driving down their road, and very rarely is it someone riding on a bicycle.
I kind of lost. Anybody else lose them?
Yeah, I think we lost Shevik here.
Okay.
Oh well.
Oh,
Well, we
there
got
he
you
is.
now.
We can hear you now.
Okay. Well, my point was that the traffic slowing is good for non-bikers as well, and I think it's a selling point that I would advise stressing further in broader conversations.
Yeah, and I think just compared to what Como used to be compared to now, not only is it nicer for Dolores, for example, to not bike along or drive along people biking, but then also, like I said, we were able to narrow this road, and that promotes slower speeds also. So that's part of what is great about separated bike lanes, is that you can remove them from the street and narrow the street a little bit more.
Other questions for Jimmy?
Sorry. I have a comment. Sorry, I had to step away and I can't stay very long, but I filled out the survey and but then after I was done, I realized the biggest problem for me as someone who generally gets around town by bike is Snelling Avenue. The sidewalks on Snelling for peds and bikes are just impossibly inadequate. And as you know, it's a very fast road. So you don't feel safe on the roadway, and you don't feel safe on the sidewalk either, because it's narrow and you're trying to, there's a lot of sharp turns. And I'm not sure how, that doesn't seem to lend itself to an easy solution. But I feel like we need to somehow get that in the next capital improvements plan, because it really cuts off the neighborhood from so many other parts of the city. I mean, you've got Randolph and you've got Lexington, and in between, there's no way to go north-south.
Yeah, Suzanne, thanks first for taking the survey. Yeah, Snelling has long been on our radar. Candidly, that is you might know, is a MnDOT owned road and a MnDOT owned bridge. So, I don't want to kick it to them, but it is their job to eventually replace that bridge. That bridge is not up for replacement anytime soon, but that is one thing we hear almost more than anything in terms of barriers is the Snelling. It's in my neighborhood. I hate it. You're right. You have to make all these awkward zigzags over like what seem to be like highway entrance ramps. It's terrible. I will say that MnDOT I've been in a couple meetings recently where MnDOT, short of replacing the entire bridge, which is, like I said, is not going to happen anytime soon. And that's what would need to happen in order to like totally do something transformational. They are planning, and over the next couple of years, maybe even next year, to do some short-term improvements that give a little bit more space to people walking and biking, and maybe do a better job of like, less zigzags kind of a thing. So I'm personally excited for that. I'm professionally excited for that. It's not going to be the thing that we dream for, but until they have plans to rebuild that bridge, that's what we can do for now, and we are trying to make kind of incremental improvements. So I appreciate that comment, and I certainly feel the same way.
Well, thanks. That's good to know, and we can pressure MnDOT if possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other questions out there?
See, Shevik has a comment in the chat.
Oh. Don't trust my video. Is there any daring to dream of additional bike ped railroad crossings in the plan? That's a great question. And again, I don't want to kick the can down the road. The biggest problem with railroad crossings are the railroads themselves. Some of you have probably heard, they are notoriously stingy with building over them or under them, or I just went on a run today, and I went from my district to your district, and I took that kind of old rickety Hamlin Bridge, the extension of Hamlin over the railroad tracks to Energy Park Drive. And I kind of paused and looked down there, and I saw Lexington and Snelling. Lexington's pretty good. Snelling, as Suzanne mentioned, is terrible. So we sure would love to create more barrier crossings. Those are something that kind of come along in terms of funding and opportunity pretty infrequently, but we definitely know that there are barriers to connecting kind of over the railroad tracks and to my side of the railroad tracks. So thank you, Shevik, for that comment.
So Laura asked if there was a bridge that goes over Hamlin, and it's from Hamlin, there's like a terrible pedestrian like death bridge that goes over the railroad tracks that kind of connects that pedestrian way or is a pedestrian connection, I should say, from Hamlin south of the tracks to Hamlin north of the tracks. But right, I think there. Yes, there's a A choice you are making.
Yeah, just north of Pierce Butler. I didn't know about it until I moved to this area, which goes back to people's comments about signage and wayfinding. It's actually not that bad, but you wouldn't know about it. It has this
Right.
long zigzag because of the grade changes on either side.
Mhm.
And it's kind of a pain if you're to bike and you kind of have to make these sharp turns and go down. So this isn't something that we would probably construct in the future. But it does exist, I suppose.
Yeah, it'd almost be nice if that's something more people knew about, because I feel like it's kind of very light use as something that makes it feel a little bit less accessible to me, because I feel like I'm always very alone.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
kind of dumps you into an area that's kind of like industrial, and yeah, for sure.
Doesn't that lead down to Lexington where you can go under the railroad bridge there? Is that what that
No,
one does?
this one goes right over kind of behind Energy Park, behind Bandana Square almost.
Right. But do you know where the bridge is on Lexington, and they cut like a little tunnel?
Yep, that's a little bit further up, kind of at kind of by McMurray, I think is what you're talking about. Yeah,
Hurry.
McMurray, which is kind of the
Oh, the
park.
field, yeah, McMurray
Yep,
Field,
yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, so there's nothing to connect, okay, from there still, yeah.
There,
okay.
Lexington actually is pretty nice on the west side to bike on, but that does stop at Minnehaha. But I use this all the time this is usually my route. I go down to Lexington, and then if I want to get over all the railroad tracks, there is a nice bridge, kind of pedestrian and bike bridge right here that goes over on Lexington.
Now, this is in the history again. When Bandana Square was built, there was a promise from the city there was going to be a walkover from Bandana to Como, and that was going to join the communities so that Bandana, would get people from Como Zoo, and it never happened. It probably never will, but
Yeah, Bandana Square is tough because it's like bound by tracks.
right. And
yeah,
that was supposed to connect them, see, and it never got built to connect anything.
Right.
And people kind of blame that for why Bandana didn't make it as more of a retail place. Now it's more other kind of uses. Yeah.
Yes, well, and as we, as Jimmy pointed out, and as we all have experienced with the Como Avenue crossing of the railroad tracks this last month, the railroad is notoriously difficult to work with and just like inaccessible to seemingly everybody. I don't know who they answer to, but it certainly isn't anyone I found. So I think that's a tough nut to crack there.
Yeah.
Are there other questions? Yeah, are there other questions for Jimmy while he's here? I want to be respectful of his time. Any other questions? All right. Well, Jimmy, thank you so much. Clearly there's interest here, in thinking about how we interface with our bike system here in Como Park and kind of across St. Paul. So we really appreciate your time.
Yes, please
tonight.
do. I'm going to put I'm typing, please do, if you haven't already, take that survey. That is the thing that we will turn to for feedback. Among other things, but that is the big thing. So thank you all very much for your time, and have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you in the spring when we have more to share.
There you go. Thank you so much.